Thank you.
And Tasha, are we doing the 1 minute thing again? Do you need me to time people when they speak?
I would love that.
Okay, now remind me, does that include you? I mean, because I was thinking, well, I can't really tell Tasha when her minute is up because she's kind of leading us more or less.
Yeah, generally the facilitator is immune from those rules, since it is my job to manage everybody else.
Yeah,
but
that's what I thought. I wanted to make sure. Okay, so unless we change our minds, everybody who has a question or replies to a question should have 1 minute.
Yeah, and if we feel like we need to, you know, expand that in some specific place, we can decide to do that together. But
okay, good. And from here on, I'll just try to stay mute unless I'm telling someone their minute's up. Thanks.
And you may want to let them know, like, at 55 seconds so they can finish their sentence.
Or 50 sentences, 50 seconds.
50 seconds. Okay, sure. I can do that.
You know, before we're officially started, I'd like to say something, which is I think this convention is going to be just a huge shitstorm. And I don't think airing our dirty laundry, you know, every time there's a convention is a good idea. I think these things really, like, you know, getting rid of a person. Do you really want to air all the dirty laundry every convention in front of everybody? I mean, it's just demoralizing. I really wish we could just push this stuff off to the large group consensus process and use the convention for things that can bring us together.
Totally, yes. Then you have your hand up.
But it's not going that way. I mean, the way we're going is it's just going to be a shitstorm.
I don't think so.
Okay,
I do.
well, I agree with Bob that I hope there's no shitstorm, although we probably have different opinions on why that it's likely. I just wanted to say I'm recording too.
That's true, Dan. Welcome.
So, so Bob, I'm hearing that desire, right? And I'm very conscious as a facilitator that the, you know, basically the only thing on this agenda that is not discussions about challenging stuff is informational items, which is not my favorite way to run a meeting.
Yeah.
That's hard. It's hard as a facilitator and it's hard as a participant, and it's not a great design. And I'm, you know, responding as a facilitator to the agenda that was drafted before I arrived on the scene. And y'all seem to have things that you need to resolve that you don't currently have an effective process for resolving, which kind of puts us in that spot.
The thing is, though, I suspect that everybody, I mean, I don't think that Nathalie or Dan wants to demoralize our base, you know, so I think that, you know, everybody, if we could find some way of dealing with these issues other than dragging it out at the convention, I would love that. So, I mean, they need to be addressed, but you know, at this point, really, I mean, who owns a banner or who doesn't? I really don't think the membership cares. You know, I don't think they give a damn. And yet we're looking at extended arguments about who owns what banner, you know, or you know, how this group came to be here and there. I mean, if we could put it in some sort of resolution process that doesn't demoralize our base, I would love to see that.
Yes.
I'm calling out Seth on immediately starting to name call, and I'm going to remind everybody that name calling, it will not be accepted and you will be simply removed from the meeting. Period. No warning. This is the only warning I'm ever going to give because I'm done with it. Chuck, you have your hand up.
The question of Dan and the banner is not on this agenda. Is that correct?
Correct. It's not on the agenda. And I also wanted to mention that we now have the large group consensus, and I hope that things can proceed through there, and we're going to make a call for people to participate in it. Thank you.
Has that issue been brought to the large group process? Has there been a filing on that matter?
There's been several filings, and yes.
Okay.
You know, I said banner, but I mean, it's the whole process of whether, you know, Lane County should be disaffiliated or not. And, you know, what's the matter of, you know, how independent are the groups? How central is our authority? I mean, it just seems to me there's a lot of issues. We're coming into an election season.
Yes, let's move forward. Let's do the agenda because
so Bob, I'm totally hearing you, and I support the basic sense that you're having, that the party as a whole would be better served by being able to focus on the future and the work that the
Yeah.
party wants to do. And I suspect that there would be broad consensus about that. And there's a strong sense that some of this stuff needs to be resolved. My hope, if we can do this well, is that we can bring people to a place where they can focus on these decisions as they impact the party moving forward, as opposed to staying focused on who said what and did what in the past. Now, that's going to be mostly, I think, up to you all to make sure that it stays focused that way. Because I suspect that most of the people who are showing up don't have a lot of skin in the game about, most of the people who are showing up who are not already part of these conversations do not have a lot of skin in the game about whether the steering committee was correct or not about blah, blah, and whether, like all of that. I don't know that they don't care, but I don't think they are vested in the way that you all are vested, which makes sense because you've been in it for this whole time. So, yeah, so there, I think that the more we can carry this idea that the substantive issues that mostly need to be addressed at this point is what are the bylaws going to look like moving forward? And are they clear about who gets to decide whether absentee ballots will be used or not and when? And what are the powers of the steering committee or the administrative committee or whatever you're calling it in the new iteration versus the convention? And what are the conventions used for versus these other processes? Like that, those are useful conversations. Those are going to support the party in moving forward. And then this other question of adopting the minutes seems to me, if we just add that piece of language, that ought to simply move that forward and be done with it. If we decide to argue about whether that means that all those decisions, like we'll be there for an hour and it will be very demoralizing for everybody. So I'm going to ask for your help as the people who are most entangled in this to try to stay focused on the future as we move forward. So,
Seth's back in. Let's just keep it cool, but I'll address his one comment that he had in the chat about the SEC could take care of it. The bylaws require a unanimous vote of the SEC to take care of that. And I think we all kind of know how that vote will shake out. So I'm not really sure what he wants to do.
Excuse me, what are we doing? What?
Justin was just addressing the comment that Seth made in the comments. So let's keep moving. So does everybody have the agenda in front of you? Does everybody have that link? And do we need to be sharing screen? I need clear information
share the
from each of
screen,
you
Chloe.
about whether we need to share the screen or whether you are already looking at the facilitator's agenda.
They're sharing the screen because a lot of the people here are not used to looking for the information themselves.
Can you all see that well enough?
Excuse me?
Can everybody see it well enough? Like glasses, I couldn't read it in the screen share. So
Is the red text your text?
the red text is mine. Yes.
Okay,
This is
and you're
stuff-
asking us to accept what you're proposing?
No, I'm asking you, I'm saying decisions that I think we need to make at our planning meeting tonight. I'm not proposing any specific anything. I'm trying to be your facilitator.
Why
And
don't you
since-
talk us through your questions and let's answer them?
I think that it's okay to actually add that because it explains, the mural. I mean, let's go through it.
Yeah, I'm not proposing leaving this in the facilitator's agenda. This was the document I had access to that you all had access to. So this is where I added these notes. That's all.
Let's talk about
So-
what you're raising.
Yes, Chuck, that's where I'm going. Okay, so I think we need to talk about the voting processes. We touched on that a bunch last time and we booted it to this meeting. So we need to, there are some decisions we need to make about that. And we need to be clear at least about what is being proposed for how that's going to work. My understanding is that that for some of these decisions, the convention is the ultimate decision-making power about it. But so we need to talk about how that's going to work, and that's a little farther down on the agenda. But the questions that I see are, so I'm checking, right? I don't see any items that the bylaws indicate are eligible for absentee votes. Is that everybody else's understanding? So we're
Yes.
not going to talk about absentee voting for
Correct,
any items in this agenda.
correct.
Anybody
I
think
would like-
otherwise?
I would like to mention that actually endorsing the proposals to go through the large scale consensus could receive absentee voting, but I don't think that we're going to go through that. We are going to decide to do it at the
No,
convention.
that's absolutely incorrect.
So what I heard Nathalie say is that she's not planning to propose that. So let's just call that good enough.
Thank you.
So we need to add to the agenda, from my perspective as a facilitator, which votes can be simple majority and which ones require a 2/3 majority, so that it's on the agenda and everybody's clear about it ahead of time. Okay. So,
Accepting the minutes only requires a majority.
right. And then the bylaws amendments would require 2/3.
Correct.
Is there anything else on the agenda that would require a 2/3 majority?
No, because those are the bylaws are the main decision that we need to do. The other decisions are right here, the next meetings and things like that, and that's
And
majority.
the process choices about the agenda are all simple majority. Correct?
Yeah, correct.
Great. So we'll just flag that on the agenda. So then we need to talk about how we're going to vote. And so what I tried to do here was to list the options that I think we had all talked about. Let me know if there are any that I'm missing. And what I saw as the pros and cons of each, so that we could talk about it. There may be other pros and cons. I've just dumped my thinking in because that's what I had. So there was and so before, I'm just going to go through all three before anybody talks about any of it. So hang on a second. OPA vote can't be used for process decisions because of the time delay, but it does clearly allow for a verification of eligibility kind of process. So it seems like the upside is the verification of eligibility, and we would not be able to use it for decisions like who's facilitating the second half of the meeting or any of those kinds of things. We would have to use some other version for that at least. The Zoom poll can be done in real time. I'm not clear how easy it is to offer it only to the participants who are eligible to vote. Does that, I've not done Zoom polling in this way. So does somebody inside this little group know how to do that so that we're polling only the people who are actually eligible? Dan, is that you saying you know?
Yes,
Great. And is that possible?
we have already done it at the last two conventions where we considered bylaws. We did roll call votes of around 30 people each time. Basically, the verifying who's eligible is not done within OPA vote. It's simply done as people show up and as they register, someone verifies their eligibility. Then from that, you can set up an OPA vote or not.
I get it. I'm just, the only time I've ever used a Zoom poll, I did not try to differentiate between different groups of people inside the meeting.
We have
So-
people that know how to use
Yes,
it. Tasha.
we've done that.
Great.
We have a precedent for that.
That was the question I was asking. So it's possible.
Tasha,
Yes.
can I mention,
Yes.
we are going to credential everybody who comes to who pre-registers for the convention.
Great.
We cannot do that if like 10 or 15 people show up without registering. So that is a problem. In the past conventions, we didn't have a big turnout and we knew pretty much everybody. The last convention, we had 27 people at some point, but a few of them were only guests and we knew everyone. At this convention, we already have, I would say like 20 to 25 people that we don't know. So it's going to be a little bit of a problem if we have a lot of new people that we cannot credential right there.
Okay, so people are required to pre-register in order to show up, is that true?
They're encouraged to, but people can show up at the last minute. We've done that before.
Okay. So this is one of the issues we have to sort, like how are we gonna know if we're voting in real time without a way to do a verification process, we're gonna have to sort that out. Dan, hang on, let me just get through the third piece and then we'll circle back, right? So the other proposal that Chuck has been making regularly is that we just do it by raising hands. And that can indeed be done in real time, but it's really hard to accurately count votes in a group, hand votes in a group of more than 40 people. Not everybody's going to have their screens on. All of the emojis except the raise hand emoji disappear after a few seconds. And we're using raise hands for questions. So that's a little confusing. I also know of no way to visually indicate who's eligible to vote and who's not. And the only clear record we would have of each of those votes is the recording, where we'd be trying to match either pictures that don't have people's names on them or non-faces that have people's names on them with some kind of voting, vetting. Like, I'm just confused about how that would even work. So that's what I got. Dan.
Okay, regarding the people that show up the day of the convention, they have to be vetted and verified eligible. That applies to both any method of voting, whether it's OPA or show of hands. Again, we have done show of hands before with about 30 people, and it only took a few minutes to do. If there's any doubt about whether someone is raising their hand or not, then we can simply proceed to a roll call. Again, that doesn't take that long. You just ask someone if there's there. We'll have the list of over the day. Someone's going to be figuring out who's eligible, so we'll have a roll call list. And OPA vote often has glitches. We've had bad glitches in all our last major OPA votes, including last January.
Okay. I mean, I will say that I've had trouble getting even the bunch of you to give me a clear indicator of what you think and what you want in these last two meetings. So I'm really worried about having 50 people that we're trying to corral through a hand raising process, but Nathalie.
A couple of things. I wanted to ask you, when we do a poll in Zoom meeting, we need to create it right there, correct? Like, we cannot prepare polls in Zoom.
The last time I used a Zoom poll was like 2.5 years ago. I am not the tech expert. I, in fact, had a tech support person doing most of the Zoom tech in that meeting. So I am not your expert. You should have other folks who know how to do that.
Because I'm not sure that it's possible to preset. I'll have to verify that. So I'm going to make a little note here to myself oops. And so so that's my question. That's one question. Okay. Hold on a second. Let me just. How do I do this?
Here, I can assign it to you.
I just want to put like a.
Yeah, hang on and I'll assign it to you.
Okay, put a note. So number one, so like creating these polls, I would like to also have a track record, a record of, that everybody was able to vote, that everybody who voted was actually qualified to vote. The reason why OPA vote had glitches last time and the last few conventions was not a problem with OPA vote. It was a problem with us, basically. The first one is our database was not updated, and it now has gone through an extensive update, And we're very strict about pre-qualifying very early on, so we'll have that list ready as much as possible before setting OPA vote. And the other problem we'd had at the previous conventions, particularly January, is that people submitted proposals the night before, so we had to scramble to create that OPA vote. That's not going to happen this time. It's going to be very clear. So what I wanted to
10
mention,
seconds, Natalie.
what I wanted to mention to them is we can do a poll at the convention to get a sense, and then also do an OPA vote that people can vote, at the end to confirm and have a track record of the vote. So just a second, because it's a clarification. To have like confirmation, make sure that everybody who was able to vote, who was present at the convention, is going to be able to receive the OPA vote. Some people will probably want to have also the time to read some of these things because, again, they will not have participated in things before. So,
Okay, so hang on, Nathalie. We'll circle back to that, but thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
Justin.
Thank you. So I think you should understand that my job right now is I've been tasked with verifying who's a supporting member. So in order to vote on certain things, you must be quote unquote a supporting member and meet all those qualifications. So that involves getting a list of registered voters from the Secretary of State. That involves verifying who's made a donation. That involves verifying who's done volunteer hours. So the list pretty straightforward. I should have that from the Secretary of State by the 8th, according to our treasurer, Ken Adams. So we'll be able to verify that those that are like whoever a registered member is. Pulling donors, also pretty straightforward. The volunteer lists, we just taking people at their word. The chapters just have to submit a list to me of those people that have volunteered in their chapter. So, but doing all of that on the day of the convention as a matter of like procedure is very
Sorry,
clunky.
Justin, 10 seconds, sorry.
Very
Yeah.
clunky and time consuming.
Yep.
And not a good use of the convention's time.
I hear that. And so, this might be a thing to think about in terms of your procedures. If people want to vote, maybe they have to pre-register 3 days in advance so that you have time to verify them. I mean, the other upside of OPA vote then is that the verification can be done afterwards because we don't expect the vote to be available in real time. So,
correct.
Chuck.
Can I talk?
I just said, Chuck, yes, you're up.
So Tasha, our rules are that we are a direct participatory democracy. The business of the party is done by those who show up. The OPA vote is not necessary to conduct the business of a convention through the Zoom meeting. The hand raising is adequate. A voice accounting is a backup. This is all straightforward. We've already done this many times before. OPA vote is not necessary. I'm a block on it being used in any of these matters. It's conceivable, Tasha, that you could get the group to a consensus. You could talk to the group and you can say, does anybody have an objection? And you would ask them, what's your objection? And
10
would you be a
seconds, Chuck.
stand aside? And
Right.
you could
Always
lead
my
the group
favorite
to
version.
consensus. OPA vote is absolutely anathema to the consensus process. Hand raising is adequate. Voice backup is
Okay.
gonna work.
Okay,
Chuck.
so let me respond to that really quickly, because as I understand your process, we don't even go to a vote until we've tested consensus. And so my assumption,
That's
and
correct.
there's more of it down below, but my assumption, I mean, I do a great deal of facilitating of consensus process. My assumption is that my first job will be to see if we can get to consensus. My second assumption is that for some of these things, there is no friggin' way because we don't even have consensus inside this group.
So you
Right.
just call the vote and we facilitate it by raising hands and we count and you'll have.
I
backlog people to
understand the
help.
model, Chuck. However, we just heard from Justin that he is not sure that he can verify if 15 more people show up on the day of, whether they are actually qualified to vote or not. And so if we're making decisions in real
No,
time,
that's his job to do that. And that's not a problem. We can clean that up. He's going to have, going into the meeting, he's going to have all of these people that have already filed. They're going to be verified. He's not going to
just said it was a problem.
he's not going to do it on.
It's not ideal. We would like preferably be able to qualify at least most of the people. You're right.
Well, then you'll do it 48 hours before. And this business of people coming at the last minute, you handle it.
Thanks for volunteering me.
No, you've got the lists, you've got the keys, you know, that's not a problem. This is becoming silly. This whole rationale of verifying. You don't put.
Chuck, if you may,
Tasha,
Pause,
my point, you don't.
pause.
I'm
I
pausing.
understand your opinion, Chuck. I totally understand your opinion. The other people don't share it. So this is one of those moments where we have a disagreement, and continuing to repeat yourself is not going to make other people stop thinking what they're thinking. Okay, I have not heard from Connor yet. So Connor, you are up.
Just a quick kind of fact check. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe our SCC terms, you and my Chuck, came from OPA voting. So I'm unclear on when this new no OPA vote thing came in.
Thanks.
We
Nathalie.
don't have any. I don't. What are you talking about?
So we have used OPA vote very successfully in the past. It really, the only problem has been setting it up on time, which we're doing now because we're being very proactive with having the updated database, blah, blah, blah. We cannot credential people the day of the convention. That's why we need to have a process to be able to credential them. And the only way that I see how that works is using OPA vote. What I'm flashing here on the screen, I know Chuck, that's fine. We agreed to this.
Read my chat.
And don't interrupt, please. Because I extend my time. What I'm showing here is Zoom produces a record of, it's a spreadsheet. It has more columns than that, but it shows every single party. This is the participants to the January convention. And it shows the participants for everybody who participated and how long they participated. So we can keep track of who is participating and who is present at the convention. So I know that the concern that Dan and Chuck have is they want to limit people who are just right there at that moment. Some of the people who are going to participate have small children. And if they have to go and tend to their kid,
I'm sorry,
just when
Natalie,
the
10
poll is
seconds.
happening, they might not be able to vote because they're tending to their kid just at that moment. So I think that for issues of fairness, verification of the vote, the track record and all of that, that I am going to suggest that we need to have verification through OPA vote. We can still take a vote at the convention, but there needs to be a verifiable verification. So what I'm suggesting is I'm not invalidating the using the poll at the convention. We can totally do that. And if needed, we can also resort and have an OPA vote ready for verification purposes afterwards for the people that we
Thanks,
cannot
Natalie.
credential. Thank you.
Dan.
Yes, OPA vote doesn't verify anything more than that you got an email address from someone. And for people that show up during the convention day, that only makes things more complicated from having to get their email address and add it to the voter list on OPA vote. Now I'm going to, as far as people voting when they're not there, no, that's not allowed. I'm going to quote, this is bylaw 4B, amendments to the mission statement. Statement of principles, constitution, and bylaws will require an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the supporting members eligible to vote and voting at a convention.
Yeah.
There shall be no voting by mail or proxy. They have to be at the convention.
It
If they're
doesn't
not
say,
there,
Nathalie was not suggesting that they wouldn't be at the convention. She was
well,
suggesting
if
they
you're
might
not
have to
there
step
answer,
away for 10 minutes.
then they're not there. It's simply that's like walking out of a physical convention to go get coffee while the vote's going on. If there's a
Or
vote
go
at a convention, you got to
mention
be
your
at the convention
child.
to vote, don't you?
no, it's not the same. When you have kids, you tend to your kids.
Well, so you might have to leave a convention to tend to your kids, but you're still not at the convention.
Well,
This
you
is-
know
you're-
what?
you're-
This is
We're
one of
not
those
going to agree.
places where
It's-
we see a
it's
tension
absentee.
in your goals and principles between this immediate participatory democracy and inclusion. So I'm just naming it.
No,
Right.
Tasha, we're
It's
talking
convention.
about plain English. At
We
a
are talking about plain English. I'm just
That-
saying to you in plain English, your values say you want to include a bunch of people that you may be excluding because they have parenting responsibilities.
No, you're
That's all.
reading into plain English with values. This is not a value statement. At a convention means at a convention.
I understand what
statement
you're
of
saying.
locality.
I'm not even
Okay.
saying that your language is not saying what you say it's saying. I'm saying it's in tension with your values statement and your principles. That's all. Chuck.
That's an appeal to motive.
Okay. Tasha,
Yes.
we govern by the people who show up at convention. We don't need OPA vote at all for this convention.
Okay,
The OPA vote.
Okay, you have said this 3 times, Chuck. Stop for a minute. I heard Justin say it was going to be a struggle for him if 15 people show up on the day of to do the verification process.
That's
I am
rubbish.
suggesting to you that
No.
if the person who's responsible for that is telling you it's going to be a challenge, which might even just mean he's not going to be able to do that and participate at the same time, and he would like to be able to participate,
right.
you know, you can keep shaking your friggin' head as much as you want. You're not the one doing it.
I've
So
run
you
a
don't-
convention. I know what's involved in
sure
You
setting
haven't
up
done
OPA.
anything for any convention. Come on, don't exaggerate. You
Dan
haven't
and
done
I are
anything.
sticklers for the rules. This is at convention. Those who are present participate. There's
Wait,
no other
There's
way
been
around
no
that.
argument
There's
about
no
people
argument.
Nobody is saying we should be having people voting who aren't there. We are suggesting that there are challenges to differentiating between the people who we know are eligible to vote and the people we don't know are eligible to vote in real time at the convention. So there are a couple of possibilities here, right? So one possibility is to be clear. We're going to do this as a Zoom. We're going to do this as a Zoom poll, right? But it's not a final decision until the final verifications about who can vote have been made, right? So
That's a
if we don't
tactic.
know for sure, then we say, okay, so this is what it looks like in the room today, and 24 hours from now, we're going to come back and make sure, we're going to make a statement, we're going to amend the notes from the meeting to say, here's what the vote looks like if we're only counting people who are actually eligible to vote. And that might be exactly the same, and it might not be. So that might cover Nathalie's concerns and yours. Right? I still want to make sure, and you know, I am not the tech queen, so you know, y'all figure this out. I want to flag for you that you need to make sure that the way the Zoom poll works will allow you to differentiate between people who are eligible to vote and people who aren't. That's all. That's a tech question. I'm delegating it to you to solve. Okay? So I will say that as your facilitator, I have serious qualms about doing an actual technical legal vote by hand raising. I am happy to do straw polling that way. I am happy to work on a creating consensus that way, as I do that all the time. That's a good and powerful, that all works, right? But if there are 50 people in the room, I have seen many challenges happen when we try to do a raise your hands thing, especially since we have no way visually on Zoom to like put a little star next to the people's in the people's squares who are eligible to vote, which means that we're counting, but we don't, like right now, if I'm counting and I'm looking at this screen, right? I know I've got Justin and Amy and Felipe and Connor and Dan, like I can see all of your names, but I don't always see everybody else's. Right? So people got their hands in the air. Like I can't see right now, I can't see Nathalie's name. I can't see Chuck's name. I can't see Seth's name. Right? So it's not about, Amy, it's not about a ballot. We're not even going to have a ballot. We're just going to be polling. Right? And so if I'm counting hands and I can't tell by looking at the square who's eligible to vote and who's not, then we got to do a 50-person roll call every time, which is going to eat an enormous amount of time. So
But you're proposing a ballot, an OPA vote for every decision every time?
No, I am
Take even more
proposing that
time.
at minimum, we should be, and if the technology works, we should be using a Zoom poll if we have to go to a vote. After doing the straw polling, that gives us a pretty good sense of where we are, which we will do using other methods. But mostly using Mural, so that we can actually see in real time where folks are at.
Yes, so the vote is going to be at the convention with people present at the convention, Chuck. And then that's what's going to happen. We hear you, we validate it, that's what's going to happen. The OPA vote, especially for the bylaws, is going to be as a verification purpose to have a ballot, verify that everybody who received the ballot or who was present was actually a supporting member, just doing things right to have a record.
Well, then they need to vote in a 30-minute window of time, and we'll get a result at convention.
You guys are
There's
trying
no
to
24 hours later. That's rubbish.
You know, it's just so that you guys can verify that everybody who received the ballot was
No,
actually.
people don't get a
member
ballot who's not
present.
verified. That's the point, Natalie. You don't send a ballot to someone who's not vetted.
Exactly,
That's
that's
bad
why,
business practice.
that's why we're gonna need a little time afterwards.
So how does sending a ballot verify them?
Excuse me?
How does sending a ballot to someone verify? You verify before they send the ballot. The logic
Correct,
is
exactly.
backwards.
We
Yes, right.
verified.
The
we
ballots would only be
verified-
sent to people who have already verified.
Yeah,
Then
so
but-
what's the, okay,
we
but Natalie's
verify everybody
contending
who's
that,
participating in the convention and make sure that all of those who are participating at the convention are supporting members. We will have pre-qualified, I would say like 80% of them, but we don't know how many more people are going to show up then. And so those people need to be verified for supporting member status. And that might happen after the convention if we have 10, 15 people. We cannot do it otherwise because we want to participate at the convention, right? So I'm not invalidating what you're saying. I'm validating we're going to have people who are present at the convention vote. We just need to have a voting method that will allow us to make sure that the ballots are indeed received by people who are qualified to vote. Supporting
So
members present.
Nathalie, it seems to me that there are two ways to do this, right? So one way to do this is if the technology allows, and I just don't know, right? If the technology allows, one way to do this would be to use the Zoom poll instead of OPA vote. Give us a record of who voted on each thing, and then compare that list with your registered supporting members after the convention,
It's
right?
not going to be
To
possible.
make sure.
Oh, after the
What?
convention. So we would have
After the
to,
convention, right? So we move through the vote process using a Zoom poll, right? In real time. Chuck, wait. In real time, the people who are present vote, right? In that moment, we get a clear list. We say, look, this is what the results look like now. Because 15 people showed up who hadn't pre-registered, and Justin wanted to actually participate in the friggin' convention and not spend all of his time trying to verify that those people were registered. We're going to do a check at the end of the convention, and we will send an email out to everybody who was at the convention an hour after the convention and just say, okay, right? Everybody who voted was a bona fide supporting member, or two of these votes don't count. And if that happens to change the results, it changes the results. Probably it won't, right? I suspect most of the time your counts are not that tight, right? So that would allow a record. Now, the real question for me is like, does the technology allow you to poll only the people in Zoom who you have decided you have on your list ahead of time as either clearly verified or claiming to be supporting members? Because those are the people that you would allow to vote in the poll. Right. So I don't want to try to sift through this now.
Yeah, I'm reading it.
I want somebody who is not me in the course of the next hour or 3 or day to verify that that's possible.
Why
Right?
do we need to take a poll?
Because
We
it's
need a
way to
written record of who voted so that it can
A
stay
poll
verified.
is not a vote.
Sweetie,
A poll can be
we are
used as a
using-
vote. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
We're talking about using the
Oh.
function of a Zoom poll, right? Which is just a piece of technology to vote. So
Okay.
that we do not have to do a 20-minute roll call each time, which is gonna, I mean, I
That's what
feel
I
bad saying it
understand.
only takes 20
Okay.
minutes to do a roll call for 50 people. Yes, it takes 20 minutes. And if we have to do 3 roll calls in the course of a 5-hour meeting, then we've lost an hour.
Eventually we have to vote. The steering committee can vote and then we can put it to the convention. So the steering committee can vote what, you know,
Right.
we can
So
decide.
I would like us to move on from this because this was like the first piece of the thing I thought we needed to decide tonight, and it is 8:14. I understand I think we have just created a proposal at least that would ensure that only people who are physically present in the moment that the vote's getting taken will be able to vote, which ought to satisfy the Chuck and Dan contingent here. And we'll create a written record and allow verification afterwards in case there's a problem.
Correct.
Felipe,
Perfect.
Felipe, we have not heard from you. Please step in.
Well, thank you. I kind of hearing here repeatedly that only people present have the right to vote. Only people present have the right to vote, have the right to decide for the whole entire party. If you're have it mean to be present because you have the time, you have the resources, then you have the right to vote. Many fellows that won't be able to attend for the reason that there is, we are saying you have no voice on this party, therefore you cannot vote, and we are going to decide the future of this party, your party, by the way, for you. Is that something that I don't think I can handle? It's unbelievable. Now we are over and over and over and over trying to block people that may or may not want to vote just because they didn't have the 25 cents to take a bus or...
I'm sorry, Felipe,
become-
10 more seconds, sorry.
Well, thank you. Well, but I guess that everybody will get the idea that I'm trying to put there. Unbelievable. Thank you.
I don't know what Felipe is trying to communicate, Tasha.
I do. Would you like me to,
Can you-
Felipe,
yes,
let me
tell
try to
me.
reflect back and you can tell me if I've got what you're saying. I am hearing you saying that the requirement that the only people who can make decisions are people who are physically at the convention excludes a significant group of members who do not have the ability to participate in the conventions because of the other commitments in their lives. Is that an accurate representation?
Correct.
And that you're feeling like that's disenfranchising a large number of people in the party?
Yes, and sad because some people on this group kind of trying to do that for no purpose. I don't understand the purpose of that blocking. I don't really understand it. That's all. Thank you.
I don't
Let's
understand
move
what
on.
Felipe is proposing.
He's
I
not
think
proposing
Felipe is-
anything. He's reflecting back at the fact that you're trying to
Right.
disenfranchise people.
I don't understand what he's proposing.
Well, he has not made a proposal. I think what he's
He's just,
reflecting,
okay, then
If you allow me, I can propose this.
Right.
Since I came to the party 2 years ago, I'm being in two convention. Both of them use Open Vote, not because the software failed, it's because the component of the party, the structure, the people that run the convention have some problem figuring out the right way because we want to please somebody that keep yelling and screaming and we want that person to stop talking. And we try to do whatever we can to please the louder voice. That's what I'm trying to say, Chuck. You were in charge of putting this convention together, and out of nowhere now somebody else is doing it. So I don't understand why we are not using our time. By the way, you know why we're doing that? Because we're gonna fix the OPA vote problem. Let's let the OPA vote go on to see if the fix. And
10 seconds, Felipe.
thank you to Justin and everybody else involved to see if the fix work. That's what we're working on, trying to fix what happened on the last convention so we can have a successful convention this time. Thank you.
okay. So I am, the issue that Felipe is raising is not an issue that we can address tonight because we have to respond to the existing language in the existing bylaws about who's permitted to vote. So I hear Felipe, I think I hear Felipe advocating for reconsidering the requirement that the only people who get to help steer the party are people who can show up at 3 conventions a year. Is that?
That's what I heard also.
Right.
In the
So
bylaws.
that's a larger question
Yes.
and we can struggle with tonight, but Felipe, I super appreciate your bringing it. And I'm seeing a lot of folks in the chat agreeing with you. So, that's part of the bylaws question then, right? So if we're going to talk about,
No, it's not.
well, it may not be in the proposal now, but the only way you could change it is by amending the Constitution and the bylaws, I
That's
suspect.
correct.
Right. So I'm just naming, right? The procedure for addressing that would be to attach that to the conversation about bylaws and work it there.
To
right?
take it to the large group consensus.
Yes, it could go through the large group consensus process in that way. So those are, I'm trying to separate process from content here. So in terms of process, we don't have the opportunity at this moment to change that requirement for this convention. I would like to push us on right now and ask Nathalie to do that research about Zoom poll to see whether we can use it to create the paper trail that you need. Will you do that?
Yes, it looks like, I'm going to look, it looks like there is a possibility to produce a report, but I don't know how many, I need to see whether we can create the polls beforehand. And so we're not like scrambling to do it right there at the convention.
Right.
And also what type of report. It looks like it produces a list of names, emails, and the poll and the vote. So
Right.
we might be able
So
to
that would
use
probably
that
give
as
us
a-
what you
yeah.
need. Okay,
And then
so
what we
if you
can
would,
do is go through that list, and anybody who is not qualified after the convention,
their
we can
vote
go
would be
back and just kind of delete
eliminated.
those
Okay.
votes.
Great. So if you would double check that and then email us and let us know, that would be
Correct.
great.
Correct. And the default that I suggest is we'll do a poll at the convention quickly, like yes, no, to satisfy Dan and Chuck's concerns about having things at the convention by people who are right there, right then. So I'm not invalidating what you guys are saying, but it may be that for some of these, we might want to have a verification through OPA vote. And rather than scrambling last minute, what we're going to do as a steering committee is have that ready beforehand. So we don't have to scramble last minute.
Okay, so let's hold that. We are undoubtedly going to have yet another meeting about all of this. I can see it.
No,
in
we're
the
gonna
cards.
push. Eventually, we can limit discussion because the steering committee can vote and we can vote.
Let's pause that. Let's keep going. I mean, really, we have not, we're at page 1. So in fact, I'm going to insert page numbers here so we can track where we are. Okay, so I'm assuming that somebody besides me is managing the voting process, and I'm just going to let you all figure that out.
Yep, we'll have
So-
a team to watch the hands and count the poll and all that. Absolutely. That won't
So-
be your problem.
Right, I just naming it, right? So your bylaws say that you're using a modified consensus process, and I pulled this language off of your modified consensus process page in the thing. Nathalie, will you share screen again so that people who aren't looking at this document separately can look? We're on the bottom of page 1 if you're looking at the document separately. So we're down here. Yeah, scroll down. Yes, right. So here's
that's
the
perfect.
language.
Mhm.
Here's the language that you used on the modified consensus process page. So it sounds like this from the back and forth, Chuck, that you and I had, that in fact, this is the practice that you do, right? A proposal is made, there's some discussion, we test for consensus to see if we have a consensus. If there's no consensus, we try to resolve any blocks or stand-asides, any concerns that people have. We test again for consensus. And then if we don't have it, we call for a vote to override. Is that an accurate representation of what actually happens at conventions? Nathalie?
In the past, it was. I would suggest that we use some kind of a modification, like proposal is made, clarifications first, and then test for consensus. And I don't know. I think that I don't know if we want to go for each vote into many repeated votes. That's the process usually.
Well, I mean, I would prefer to use the process that you
Okay,
have linked to the document if
That's
we can
good.
do it.
that's good.
Follow our process, Tasha. That's consensus. That looks fine.
Okay, so, and then I want to get clear, I want to just be really clear about what test for consensus means to you, because it means different things to different people, right? So yes, clarification questions, all that stuff goes in the discussion section. So I would prefer, as a facilitator, to do the test for consensus process, not using the same voting process that we use to make decisions, if we're going to move to the vote, because that's super confusing to people. So I would prefer to test for consensus by asking on Mural for a visual of where folks are at on this, right? Are you like, yep, I'm ready to go, definitely in consensus? Do you still have questions? Are you a stand aside or are you a block? Let people just put dots up where they are on the thing. And then if there are blocks or stand asides, I will ask those people to speak, and then we'll try to address it, right? And we'll do the same thing for questions. Is that a sufficient testing of consensus by your procedures? Or do we actually have to do a formal?
That's good.
That's good?
Yeah, because
That
we can go
works?
to a vote.
Okay, so then if we don't have consensus, we'll move into the vote process, but that way we are not going through whatever friggin' voting process we're using more than once for a given issue. So, okay, excellent. So we have this question about whether we're going to disable participant chat. I am going to strongly recommend that you disable participant chat, because my experience, especially in a big meeting, is that it's super distracting for people to be trying to track what's actually happening in the meeting and what's happening in the chat at the same time. And it means that there's all these side conversations, right? Like if we were actually in a physical room, it would be incredibly noisy with all of those side conversations happening. And the noise is still there, even though it's non-auditory. And we tend to then end up with people not speaking their mind in the meeting where everybody can hear it, or where I can hear it and respond to it, but instead doing all of this blah, blah, blah over here, which is it pulls attention away from the actual conversation that everybody is engaged in. So that's my recommendation. I see Amy and Dan. Amy, I have not heard from you except about process stuff. So if you have a content comment, you're next.
Oh, well, I'm afraid this is just more process. I
Okay.
support your point of view about chat. It can be distracting, although it can also be useful. Will people in the meeting have an ability to reach out for assistance if they start having a problem that messes with their ability to participate? I only ask that because normally people would use chat for that. Thanks.
Use chat for that. That's a really good question. And
Yes, you can set the chat up so that people contact the hosts and co-hosts, but not everybody. And I think we need to
okay.
go
So
through
that
a
would,
vote. We
that
need
would
to go to
settle
a
that.
vote on this because we're not going to agree. And
Okay,
and I don't want
so-
to belabor it.
So so at least that's an answer to Amy's question. Dan.
Yes, I would strongly recommend that you leave this up to the convention, as the convention has the right to decide that this is a convention rule issue, besides which it would be a fairly radical departure from our precedent. In all of our previous Zoom conventions, there has been chat. It would not be a popular decision. While chat is noisy, it doesn't tend to interfere with the other modes of convention. And it's also the only way that most of the attendees have to communicate with each other and say something without waiting to be on the stack and say
Well,
things.
Right. So this is why we're using Mural, because we will then do a lot of break people into small groups, let them talk to each other, let everybody put sticky notes up simultaneously so that everybody's ideas are going up at the same time.
And it's only
This is-
usable on a computer. People, not everyone's going to have access to that.
We're gonna have
Right.
avatars, assigned
We're gonna
avatars.
have,
All of
we're
a
gonna
sudden we care
partner
about
them with
accessibility.
No, that's not equal participation. If someone has to take the time to translate for
All of a
someone
sudden
else,
you care about equal access.
okay, well, apparently
Not
you
only that,
don't.
but people who cannot read fast cannot have quick access to the chat. It's even more limiting. I think that the mural offers a really good way for y'all to participate, for everybody to participate and see each other's comments. Chat
Unless
is
they're on a
really
phone.
difficult, especially when people have been verbally abusive. You know, the people who have to manage the chat cannot participate in the convention. So I'm going to advocate very strongly, and we can set it, we can put it to the convention for.
we will undoubtedly have to let the convention decide. My proposal is that that we put it on the agenda as a procedural recommendation and allow the convention to decide.
Yeah, let's do that, and we'll, yeah, totally.
Justin,
I just think when we're talking about precedent, like the precedent, you may be unaware but unsurprised, has been that it's been a bit of a mess. So I don't think precedent is necessarily a selling point here. But yes, I agree with you. The mural would take the place of that chat. I do agree the chat is a bit distracting. The convention does have ultimate say in the rules, but we can present rules to them for them to change. I suppose we can tell them how it's going to be, and they can, you know, veto that or whatever. But yeah, thank you.
okay. So do we need to make a formal decision about that here, or can we just go with, we'll put it in the proposed procedures and let the convention decide if they want to challenge that?
Let's put it in the procedures and let convention decide. We'll do a pro and con real quick. Or actually, I think that you should present the pro and con so we don't get into arguments.
Okay. So, so that takes us right into the agenda approval modification process. So if we're looking at the agenda again, Nathalie, maybe share screen again. We are, for those of you looking directly at it, on page 2, number 3. So this is a procedural question for me. Is your regular procedure that you have a proposed agenda and that you just use it, like there's a check-in, we're reviewing the agenda, and then the agenda just moves forward unless somebody says they want to make a change? Or do we have to actually vote in the agenda and procedures proactively?
The agenda has to be approved actively.
Okay. So that's fine. That-
We can just, yeah.
Okay, great. So I need to go in and like work my facilitator's agenda so I know what I'm asking folks to do. So, okay, so I'm just going to make a note for myself. Needs to be formally adopted. Okay, great. So, and then if changes are proposed, do you vote item by item to stick with the proposed version or accept the amendment? So, and how does that work if folks are asking to add things that take time? Because like, this is like your facilitator's nightmare is for somebody to say, here's an hour-long thing that we should insert, and it gets approved, only there hasn't been any discussion about what's going to come out in order to fit that in. So I'm not clear about what the process is. Like if it's just a procedural thing and like we're going to use the chat or we're not, that's clear to me. It's not clear to me if somebody says, I actually think we should spend an hour and a half talking about the presidential nominations, or something else that's not on the agenda at all yet. And like, how do we navigate the tension between that and the larger agenda?
this is where we need to, where we need to come together in good faith and try to get the party forward.
And I'm really just asking this as a process question, right? So one of the groups that I worked with a lot generated their agendas on the ground at the beginning of every 3-day retreat. We came together the night before, the first night, and we just generated the whole thing, which was fine, right? But there's this tension that comes when a bunch of work's been done on an agenda and there's a process for amending it, and there isn't a clear process for, okay, how do we make a decision about how we're allocating time? So I'm really just asking a process question. Dan, you got a process question answer here?
Yes, well, you just went through the modified consensus process, and I think if it would be reasonable if someone comes up with a proposal that would radically alter the agenda to just go through that step by step by asking them, well, what do you want to remove from the agenda? How are they make a complete proposal that will actually make it fit into what's there?
Okay.
I have a question for Dan. Dan, do you anticipate that this agenda is going to be modified radically by your group?
I'm trying to answer Tasha's question. That's all.
I'm not trying to trick you or anything like that. I just want to know, are you guys planning to suggest major modifications of the agenda? We need to know ahead of time.
I'll let Chuck answer.
I would anticipate the possibility of making a full-blown a block on using OPA vote in this event. I have no problem with polling. I think that's fine as a way to get a record. But Tasha, for anyone to say that you can click on the participants button in the Zoom and you can see all the hands that are raised. It's all this suggestion that it's difficult and hard to count and
Chuck,
hard to verify.
repeating
all,
the same thing over and over is abusive. And I'm not
Natalie,
going
hang
to
on.
repeat
I
it
don't
anymore.
need to be defended here. I don't need to be defended here.
Sorry.
I am mostly concerned about differentiating between people who are allowed to vote and people who are not in Zoom, which I don't want to be responsible for as your facilitator if we're doing a visual vote. So using a Zoom poll will solve that problem. Let's just do that. We have a written record. We're not going back to try to look at the recording, which may or may not show us the participant view. Like, it should work. So that does not sound like a radical proposal to change the agenda, which is what Nathalie was asking about. Like,
Well,
please insert an extra
I'm
hour.
gonna ask that something be strucken from the agenda.
Okay, that
Or is it
isn't
strike?
likely to create a huge time problem. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to strongly suggest that if there are counter proposals made about process issues, so the OPA vote thing would be an example, except I don't think we're actually going to do that. So that we, like, let's use disabling the chat or not, which is probably going to be an issue, that we vote on those as quickly and as cleanly as possible as separate items, so they don't bog down the larger meeting, right? We'll look at what are the process things. We'll take care of them immediately with a quick, like, statement, counter statement, and then a vote, rather than trying to do the whole consensus process for, I mean, if we could spend 25 minutes trying to decide whether to use chat or not, that is not a good use of the group's time. So with your permission, I would go straight to a vote for those simple, clear process issues, right? Are we going to have the chat disabled or not? Are we getting right, rather than trying to go through a larger process? Does that work for people?
Yes.
Okay, great. So the last major thing on my agenda is the mural creation process. So I can just create the mural to reflect the items on the agenda using my best judgment about how to support the meeting. I do this a lot. But my preference is to have at least a couple of people available to answer questions as I do that, to make sure that I'm staying in alignment with the documents that are most current and the language that's most current and all of those things. So my preferred process would be to have a couple of you who are willing to consult with me on the mural, but just to do it. If you want direct input as a group on the design of the mural, then we need to set up more meetings to do that. And it's going to add significantly to the cost of the contract, but I need clarity from you about what you want.
I think you should set it up and consult with us if you have questions. We're not trying to change or do anything bad to anybody, as you can see from the agenda and what we're trying to do in terms of the vote.
How do you anticipate mural being used, and where in the agenda do you think it would be most effective?
So I think it's going to be super useful any place we are having content-focused conversations where we actually want to know what people think, as opposed to simply how they're going to vote, right? So the complicated stuff, like especially the bylaws conversation, where it seems like we have two proposals. It's not yet clear to me, and probably not yet clear to you because you haven't finished this process, how different those are going to be, but there are likely to be at least a couple of significant differences between the two of them, where we're going to want to be facilitating discussion. We're going to want people to talk to each other about it. We're going to want people to put up their questions and their ideas and their desires, and actually have conversation as we try to build consensus around it. And with a group of somewhere between 40 and 50, if we are just doing a stack roll call and keeping people limited to even 1.5 minutes apiece, 50 people cannot actually participate in an hour in that conversation. So what Mural would allow is for us to put people in small groups where they can talk a little bit to each other, get their ideas churning, put sticky notes up in response to some questions and to the language that's been proposed that we can then group in various ways so we can sort of see where we are. It will allow us to do a little continuum map to see where people are leaning as part of the figure out where we are in the consensus process. So it's useful for all of those kinds of things. It's also a really useful place to have all the stuff in one place so that if people need to go find something, they just have a clickable link that's sitting in the mural. It's also, you know, I always put whatever your ground rules and moderation rules are on the mural so that if I need to click back to it to remind people about what we've agreed, it's right there and everybody can see it. Bob.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that both with Open Vote and with Mural, I mean, with things that we're going to use for the convention, it's a good idea to use them beforehand so we get a look at them and verify they're working and whatnot. It would be nice to see.
Nathalie is sending out an email today, Nathalie, or tomorrow, that will have a link to a practice mural where you can just go and mess around with it. It will also have my Mural Basics handout and two little video tutorials. And I am proposing that at the 10:30 to 11 time, when people are gathering and starting to set up, but we aren't actually starting the meeting, we can also make use of those practice mural and other things. And I can be there to help coach people through getting connected to Mural and doing their playing around. So there should be opportunities well ahead for people to go and poke at it.
Great, sounds good.
The thing Nathalie is sending also has all the link to Mural's technical site, which will tell you whether the device you're using will allow you to add stuff to the mural, and you can always just go try it. Some phones work, some phones don't. Most iPads work, really old ones don't. Chuck, quickly, please.
I think it'll be, I understand how you want to use the mural. Understand that applying it to a convention discussion about work that's already theoretically being done in the large group mediation process. So I see what you're proposing is to apply to a conversation, and good luck. I mean, maybe it could actually work and get some process work accomplished. So I accept that that's the application. That sounds fine and reasonable.
Great. Dan? Dan, your hand disappeared. Are you wanting to say something?
Oh, sorry, I meant to unmute myself and hit the hand instead. I heard that an email was going to be sent. It reminded me to mention that about a month ago on August 13th, an email was sent from pacificgreens.org informing the membership that apparently that the next convention will focus on updating the bylaws. I find that a bit presumptive in the affirmative sense. There's going to be members that may think that the bylaws we have right now are fine, but it included 2 links, one to the initiating group bylaws proposal, one to a discussion and responding proposal. Both of them went to Alan's response. So if another email is to be sent, I would like this to be run by John Q, who I consider an impartial person, to make sure that something like that doesn't happen again, because I think that was pretty unfair to the initiators who didn't have any of our documents shared to the membership in that email.
Hey,
10 seconds, Dan.
I apologize for that. That was totally not willful. And if you go to the webpage for the convention, the initiating proposal has been there, and I sent two, I think 2 or 3 announcements. And I'm pretty sure that one of them, actually, I don't think that I have linked in the emails, the proposals themselves. I've linked the webpage for the convention.
So may I ask John Q to vet the email for fairness this time?
Sure, then, absolutely.
Great. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to do a quick time check here. So it is 8:45. We need to, I would like us to be done by 9 if we can, because I have other stuff on my plate still tonight.
Totally, thank you.
So what are there other, so then I suggested a couple things that need to go on the, okay, so actually, let me double check. So I think I'm hearing that we do not need to have other meetings where you all have input on the mural.
Correct.
Nathalie, I'm assuming that you're willing to answer questions if I have them about stuff. Is there somebody else besides Nathalie who's also willing? So that I have 2 people to use as a resource if I have questions about language or other stuff as I'm designing the mural. Otherwise, I will just use Nathalie, but.
I don't know. Amy, would you want to be a second person, maybe? I don't want to volunteer you, but.
I can give it a go. I'm not sure how much of an expert I am on our language, but I think I'm kind of excited by mural. It actually, now that Tasha's been talking about it so much, it looks like it could be really useful. Sure.
Great. So Nathalie and Amy. So Nathalie, you're willing?
Yes.
Is there a set time we should be putting our heads together to go over
No,
anything?
I don't even think we'll need to put our heads together. I think I will just email you if that's okay when I need something, and we can always I can always set up a little phone call or something if we need to, but hopefully it'll just be hey, I'm thinking about putting this on here. Is this the most current version of the document or whatever? It should be stuff like that.
Please reach out whenever you can. I'm trying to pay attention to my email a lot as the big day gets closer. Thanks.
Okay, I need to make sure I have Amy's email address. Nathalie, since you have my email address already, will you make sure I have Amy's email address?
That's the correct address, yeah.
Okay.
It's highlighted under Starlene's name.
Okay, great. Okay, so, and then the 2 things that I'm suggesting that we add to the handout version of the agenda, which are purely process oriented, is, again, as we noted, the voting requirements and then the process we'll use for each vote so that it's on the agenda. And if people want to argue about it, we can argue about it separate from doing the vote itself, because that's always better. And then which items are purely informational, which are offered for discussion but not decision, and which for possible decision. And I added to the facilitator version of the agenda below, I color coded and added that language. So it could just be copied over, assuming that it's accurate as it is. So what else do we need to resolve, folks, in terms of the agenda?
What needs to be resolved is the availability of information. So I have put into the chat a hyperlink to the Google Public Docs PGP, and it has two documents. One is the proposal from Green Liberty of why we should accept the March convention minutes. And the second document are the highlights from with the hyperlinks to the January and the March convention minutes that give some background and context for why there's some need to highlight that absentee voting wasn't afforded to those, and the implication for affirming the convention votes. So I like that. I'm requesting that hyperlink, that document be embedded in the agenda.
It's
So
already
that
there.
when someone reads the agenda,
It's already
they
done.
can get
We can move
background
on.
information.
Chuck,
Chuck,
Nathalie says it's already there.
well, I just updated. I'll go look. I'll go check it out.
Don't update too often. Just give me the document. I already put it there.
Okay,
So
So-
I updated the document. I took out the information about Dan and Lori, and I just I stripped it down to just why the Green Liberty Caucus wants the affirmation of the March convention minutes. And there's some information background in that.
as long as I think the link hasn't changed, it sounds like Nathalie's already put it
I
in.
think if it's the link to the folder, or is it the link to two documents? If it's the link to the folder,
Nathalie, you're muted and I can't, so we can't
Chuck,
hear
you're
you.
wasting our time and you're costing us money now.
I'm not wasting
Go to the
time.
agenda.
We need
to the
clarity.
agenda.
We do need clarity here. So Nathalie, what I'm hearing you say is that you've already embedded this particular link in the agenda, yeah?
Yes,
So it's done.
I have not. Natalie says she did. I'll go look.
thank you.
Great. Okay, so are there other things we need? Are there other questions about the agenda? Either the public version or the facilitator's version? Okay, I am going to create for myself. Sorry, Nathalie, you got something?
Can we very briefly, does this part about the reviewing of the bylaws look good to you?
What page are we on?
Let me see which page.
4? No.
Let me
page-
share the document.
Like we're on page 4. So the 1225 item, is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, that looks good to you. I wanted to, John Kummery spoke about liquid democracy and has been doing research on it. Since the initiating group is going to have like 10 minutes, I wanted to request whether we can have like a couple of minutes for John Murray to just talk a little bit about what liquid democracy is. It's not that we have to implement it. We're not trying to implement it. We're just trying to introduce the concepts. That's all. And your position, Dan or Chuck?
Does that need to be in the bylaws item?
No, yes, it has to be in the bylaws item because it's a concept that's been brought up within the context
Is
of,
it part of any of the proposals though?
no, it's not.
Well, why not put it afterwards with the other stuff?
Because it pertains to the bylaw revisions and it's concepts that people can think about. And since you have 10 minutes as the initiating group, we would like to request like 2 minutes to just say, hey, there is this new concept. It's called liquid democracy. This is how it works, period. It's not in the bylaws.
Well, you can say whatever you want in your time. That's, you got no problem with that. I just don't see the relevance. It's up to you.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to add 2 minutes for John Murray to talk about it.
Where are you proposing to introduce the concept of liquid democracy?
In the presentation of proposed bylaws and sticking points area of the, so we have the initiating group has 10 minutes to present. And so what's being proposed here, you can see it on the agenda, is to add it to the response.
And it's not part of the bylaws proposal, meaning it's not included in the document for the bylaws proposal. But
Well,
it's,
then I think it should, if you, this is being silly, Natalie, if you want to introduce.
Let's not worry about it. It's
Yeah,
not
don't
gonna
worry about
change
it. This is
anything.
stupid.
Just keep going. Okay, great. So, all right. So anything else? Like, is this our final meeting about agenda prep? Or do we need, once the bylaws proposals are clear, does this group want to meet again to talk about how that's going to get facilitated?
No, we don't need to talk any further about this. Good luck running the meeting. I think it should be straightforward. I don't think there should be any headaches or any problems, especially if we don't involve open vote. That's going to be.
okay, let's move on.
Okay. Great. So my presumption at this point is that I am going to create yet another version of this agenda that just has all of my like facilitator notes in it, which I am just going to make separately and print for myself and not be sharing out, because it's really just my like, remember to ask for clarification questions here, and take people to this part of the mural and this stuff that is not, it's not, it's just my back of the envelope, like keep myself on track stuff. So there's a handful of things, Nathalie, to transfer over to the public version. You've got the email language about mural. Did that look okay to you when I sent it?
I looked at it I mean, I didn't really look at it because I was working, but
Yeah, that's fine.
but I'll do it.
Shoot me an email if you have questions or concerns about it, and let's just, so we get it out quickly so people will have time to look.
And I'm going to make sure that in addition to an email blast to all of our supporting members, I'm going to look at all of the people who registered at the convention and send them an email. Hey, we're going to use this new tool. Please make sure to check it out. It's going to be really exciting and rah, rah. Please check it out, these videos. And so to like make sure that.
And then also in that email in particular, please ask people to let you know if they're afraid that they're not going to be able, if their technology is going to prevent them. So that we know how many people we need to pair up with somebody else.
Correct. And I think that there's 2 people so far. And then if you could help facilitate that, make sure that Sabrina and whoever, Mariah or Jack or one of them, you tend to use the phone. If you could please contact your people so that we can make sure that they know how to use it, that they're familiar, that they have a good support in your own team. Like you guys are going to have to pair up. But since you support each other, I don't anticipate that would be a problem.
It'll be, of course, it's a problem. That's half
Okay,
my
then
effort.
if they
I
have a
need to be paying
problem-
attention to other things.
Okay, that's fine. We will find somebody to pair them up with to make sure
Well,
that they
thank
can
you.
participate.
Thank you,
And-
since it was your idea. That's only fair.
Oh, thank you very
Great.
much.
So, and
you could
encouraging
just-
people who normally call in on their phones, who actually do have access to a computer, to use their computer for this convention would be step 1, right? Just like letting them know this will be a lot easier if you're on your computer. I get that there are people who don't have access to a computer, and for those people, we need to find a backup system. But step 1 is to make sure that people know if you have a computer, this would be a convention to go into that way, rather than on your phone.
Then, in the spirit of cooperation and inclusion, the people who usually use the phone on your end is Sabrina, and who else? I think there's 2 people. Who else? Who are those 2 people? I'm going to make a special effort at reaching out to make sure that they can participate fully. Who are those 2 people?
Sabrina, and off the top of my head, I can't think of everyone else, but there's quite a few.
Can you please, in the spirit of cooperation and goodwill,
I'll try to let them know, just so they know what they're in for.
can you please give me their names so I can reach out to make sure that they're able to function and guide
They
them?
would not, no offense, but they wouldn't all necessarily want me to do that. I'll give their name to somebody.
You're going to give their name to someone? Okay.
Someone that can help. I don't know that they'd want me to give their names to you.
Oh, that's
Great.
fine. That's okay. Then you are going to make sure that the people that tend to use a phone have somebody who's going to help them practice and guide them through mural. Is
Yes,
that what you just said?
I'll tell them that this mural thing is going to be used, and that supposedly there's going to be a way for them to be helped to access it.
Okay,
Right,
then
but
give them my
that will
phone
only
number
work.
and my email, or facilitate, or just don't throw them out into the wild like that. Can you please?
Yeah, so Dan, it's only gonna work if people reach out ahead so that we know how many people we need to have in place and can get those pairings done.
I know,
I'm trying-
Tasha, but we're talking to people that are not going to want to communicate directly with Natalie for the most
That's
part.
okay.
That's fine.
Just
So
I don't
I'll,
need
I'll
to
give them,
figure out.
I'll give them whatever contact information is necessary.
Who are
Justin,
you-
what do we got? Justin?
We made our efforts as much as we
Yeah,
could.
I just,
Natalie, time. Justin,
let's just be consistent about this whole access issue, okay? So if we're pretending like we care so much about these people accessing the meeting by phone, yet you have no problem saying on the same side, like if they step out for a cup of coffee, that's just on them.
No,
Right.
That's the bylaws say that, Justin. Bylaws say at a convention. This isn't about anyone's values, just about the language.
Well, I think
in the
your
bylaws.
positions are value driven. Yes.
so we're not gonna solve this one tonight. I am hoping that as you talk about the bylaws, this comes up. Right, because that's the appropriate place to have this conversation. What should, moving forward, what should the rules be? That's what your bylaws should be telling you, right? So we have an agenda item where we can look at this. I haven't dug into the existing, I will do that because I'm going to need to be able to do that in order to facilitate it. I will look at both of the proposals, and Nathalie, I would like to be thinking with you and whoever else is putting the final document together where we're comparing the old, the two different proposals, so that we're being really clear visually, and also I can transfer that then to the mural.
Totally.
So please keep me in that loop, because I need to be in that loop in order to be effective at it.
Yeah, and I think that we're going to, as I mentioned, as indicated in the past, we're going to have a meeting on September 9. And so right after that meeting, I'll make sure that you have that information. I think that meeting will clarify things.
Great. Okay, so I will be, yeah, it'll probably be the 11th before I look at it, because the 10th is insane, but yeah, probably be the evening of the 11th before I look at it. But yes, that would be great. Okay. Anything else we need to resolve tonight in this final agenda planning meeting?
Thank you very much, Tasha.
Sure. All right.
And I want to
you
remind the SCC members to please vote. I sent a final vote, a final poll that I really need you to vote on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Well, I will see you all at the meeting, except Amy and Nathalie. I'll probably see you I'll email you in between as we work the mural. Okay. Thanks.
Thanks.
Night.
Okay,
Thanks, Tasha.
thank you. Good
Thank
night,
you.
everybody.
Night.
Good night, everyone. Oh my goodness. I'm glad we have a facilitator.
Yeah, we actually got through a meeting.
And you know, I'm really glad that we're recording these meetings, because it just shows how some people are just, speaking on both sides of the equation, like participation and not
Speaking out
participation.
of both sides of
will
their
help
mouth,
people,
yeah.
don't, anyways. Okay. Thank you very much, Bob.